So my name's Marilène Oliver. I'm an associate professor in print and media art, and I've been working with medical imaging to create artworks for about 25 years. And over that time, there's been huge changes in medical data and the digitization of the body, and that's kind of something that I've been very attentive to and still am very attentive to in my artwork. Today, I'm going to talk about a project that I'm currently working on called Fountains of Data. And it's actually a very large project collaborating with a number of people, but my main collaborator is Scott Smallwood, who is a professor in music. So I'm going to talk to you about this project, but I'll start off just by introducing kind of where I started. This is a photograph of my mother lying on an MRI scan bed, waiting to be scanned. And the radiographers, this is at the University of Nottingham, are just trying to figure out how they're going to get my mum all the way through an MRI scanner so that she can be scanned top to toe. Because back in 2001, I wanted to make a family portrait using MRI scan data. So this is my mum, and then this is the result of that first project. So I was able to work with the research at the University of Nottingham to MRI scan my whole family. And so what you're looking at are axial MRI scans, so cross sections through the body, printed onto sheets of plexiglass, and then they're stacked back up to create these kind of ethereal floating representations of my family. I'll just show a detail, and it's kind of an optical illusion. So if you look straight through the sculpture, you wouldn't be able to see anything. But with the as your eye looks through the sculpture, it then kind of volumes out. So you can see, while you're medical students, you can see what you probably know already what you're looking at. This is my father's very full bladder. After insisting that we stop for a pint of beer before the MRI scan, maybe not such a good idea because it came bolting out afterwards. And on the other side is my sister. But the reason I did this was thinking about, like, this was very early on in my relationship with medical imaging, but thinking about the MRI scan, not for diagnostic purposes, but as something that we treasure. Like an internal portrait. Like if you think about it, like this image of the inside of the body is so intimate and so personal and holds this promise of maybe knowing something that others on the outside don't see about you. So this idea of the promise of this like internal self. And then also I should say that my parents were divorced when I was very young. So I was also interested in how digital media is able to kind of like repair or kind of trick us. So already at that time, I was kind of thinking about that. This was quite an endeavor to do this. I should say it was a very different time. So this is when my mum jumped on that MRI scanner, there was no ethics. We had no ethics application. We were squeezed in on a Sunday afternoon in between other patients. And yeah, it was very, very generous at that time. And this is Paul Morgan, very enthusiastic to see the MRI scanner being used for a different kind of purpose. I think like radiographers and radiologists see these beautiful images, but never have the opportunity or the time to kind of see them as these portraits or to have them displayed. So they were very, very supportive. And it meant that so this was like between 2001 and 2007. At that time, I was also, although they were very supportive, it was very hard to work with these scans. They were very like heavy, and I was very much reliant on the radiographers to I sort of said, okay, I'd like a scan every 2 centimeters, and then they would have to export it, render it for me, and then I received it, and I wasn't really able to do that much with them afterwards, apart from kind of play with different materialities. But I did. So on the left-hand side there, that's my mother's scan data. And you saw in the early ones, it's like in a very rigid form. But I kind of wanted to think about like, how could you have a sort of an effective use of the scan data, like to try and translate the feeling. of what it is to be in an exhausted body. I just had a child and I was completely exhausted. And so I decided to take my mum's scans out of that rigid form, take away all the color, and just have it kind of like tied together very loosely. So she's got this called exhausted figure. The next one is called Radiant, and it's made from PET scan data. I was very interested in kind of, I guess, playing with this idea of the terminology, like this kind of glowing body. But it was the first time that I was told that I could use the data as long as it was anonymized, which felt really strange. Because I was working with my family's data, and then to receive this data, open it up, and I could kind of get a sense of that kind of person they were. I think they were very young because they had quite a large head in relation to their body. But it was a very uncanny feeling. And then you can see the next one is actually, I wanted to do the Kiss. There's a very famous sculpture called the Kiss, and I wanted to remake that using MRI scan data. And I had this great plan. The radiologist said to me, there's no way you can get 2 people in a scanner. No way. I was like, okay, but I know I got like about teenagers. I know some teenagers. So I planned for these teenagers to come and take them up to Nottingham and be scanned. But like the day before, and maybe about 2 days before, I got a call to say they'd broken up. And there was no way they would kiss an MRI scanner. So it ended up being my husband and I squeezing in. They actually pulled out of the bed of the MRI, like they pulled out the bed, and then I kind of wriggled in. No, my husband wriggled in, and then I climbed in on top of him. So he still has like bad memories of it now. Yeah, but we managed to get these scans. We're actually the images I like better than the actual sculpture that it turned out. And on the right, I reworked the MRI scan data of myself. And we lost a friend in a very like tragic accident. And I remember when I heard the news, how kind of shocked and horrified I was. And so I wanted to make this sculpture about that kind of feeling. And so what I did was I printed the MRI scans onto sheets of film and then shredded them and then turned them inside out so that they kind of stood out like that kind of feeling. So that was in my early career, was kind of just trying to play with the data in as many different ways as possible and thinking like through material. Like if you rematerialize the data in different ways, it has a very different feeling and communicates a different idea. But I always kind of kept asking about trying to get data. I really wanted to do something with heartbeats. I was really interested in heartbeat artifact. Which I was told that people don't want heartbeat artifacts. So I couldn't find a radiologist who wanted to work with me on heartbeat artifact. But I did have a conversation where they told me about this, at that time, open source software called Osirix. This is in 2007. So they told me it's open source software. I could download it for my Mac, and they hold a huge repository of data sets. And that just completely blew my mind and allowed me to, very importantly, learn how to work with this data myself and get access to different kinds of data. I only had that MRI scan data that had been exported as JPEGs. Now I was able to like work with the DICOM. I was able to work with this like volumetric data. And there was one data set which I've worked with. I probably made like 50 different sculptures and artworks using this data. And I was also thinking the time about like our digital selves and these avatars that we can kind of dress up or dress down kind of to reflect our personalities or our thoughts. So I've made a huge series of sculptures from this data set. And so at that time it was an anonymized. The resolution was really good, but it wasn't possible for me to really kind of export a likeness that was too close, but it was still on the edge. I still felt very, very uncomfortable about using this data. But to show you some of the images, on the left-hand side, I used the data to create an etched figure out of copper. I trained as a printmaker. And so with etching, it comes from the word to eat. So you put a sheet of copper into a chemical solution, and then it actually eats into the copper. So I kind of ate this body out of the copper. And then the next one, you can see I was playing with all the different kind of like the all the different axes that you can put through data. I played with kind of reformulating the data so that then Melanix, this data set had 8 arms, thinking of like the mother goddess who's trying to protect all her children. My mother-in-law died from intestinal cancer, and I remember very strongly a moment when there was conversation with her medical team saying that if the chemotherapy worked, then she could have an operation, and then her intestines could be removed, and she could survive. And that kind of image of like, what does it take to survive? So that I made this like dugout sculpture. I also worked with interactive media, so there's like a live dance performance, whereas the dancer kind of moved Melanix's body defleshed. So as she moved like her right arm, Melanix's arm defleshed, moved her leg defleshed. So really kind of played with this data in so many different directions. But I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with how much recognition there was when I exported these different versions or materialized these different versions. I didn't know who the original subject was. I did reach out to the study team to check that this was okay. And they were very comfortable with it. They were happy with it, but I still felt very uncomfortable. And I think it's a question that's even more important today about our responsibility towards anonymized data. So in 2016, I came to the University of Alberta, and one of my first goals was to try and get a new high resolution scan data set of myself. Like working with my own data, I kind of felt much more comfortable. Took a few years, but managed to do it. And the reason well, there was many reasons, but the main reason that I wanted to get a high resolution MRI data set was because I was always intrigued by the idea of like virtual reality. I know that like an MRI scan or DICOM data is volumetric, it's 3D, can be 4D. Surely then you could import it into VR and then go into the body. So I had this kind of goal. And so it took a few years, and I worked with the Peter S. Allen Scanner Center here, Peter Sears, who was like super supportive. And then with Pierre Boulanger and Punitha Kumar, who are in radiology and computing science. And we managed to make this work. So what you're looking at here is a piece called Deep Connection. I was MRI scanned, but it took 3 times to manage to get a full body MRI scan. The scenario that I wanted to have in the virtual reality was that the person with the VR headset, like the physical human, became a companion for the virtual body. And the idea was that they would have an outstretched hand, which then the physical human would hold, and that would then animate the body. So I tried to put my hand out, but I got cropped. And then every time it took 3 goes, but in the end it was good because it meant that when I presented this work, I could have these 3 like failed data sets that were then enabling the virtual data set. So I kind of like that idea. But I'll show you. So this is what it looks like in virtual reality. You put the headset on, and then you reach out to this hand, and then as long as you're holding the virtual hand, the heart beats and the lungs breathe. And then when you let go, it stops breathing and the heart stops beating. Okay, so that project was it was pretty successful, and and through it became aware that there were many other people working with virtual reality and with medical data on campus. And so we formed a research collaborative team and on a project called Know Thyself as a Virtual Reality. So we worked with people in rehabilitation medicine, in law, in ethics, in music, to think about like the ethics and the aesthetics of working with medical scan data in virtual reality. And to think about like, how do we do this ethically? And but also like realizing when we made this virtual reality piece that the controls are there are bits of software out there, but they're very limited. You don't really get like much control about how it looks, what kind of sounds, what kind of text is displayed with it. So we actually kind of like innovated all these new tools to be able to work with MRI scan or any kind of DICOM data in virtual reality. So the project ended up with like this whole set of resources, a set of ethical guidelines, but also two artworks. One was called My Data Body, and the other one was called Your Data Body. Because we had this from the first piece, you had the MRI scan, but then to think how much data, we have the MRI scan data body, but then all these other bodies of data that we generate and are kind of responsible for. And thinking about how lots of these kind of big tech companies aggregate all that data. So I created a virtual reality artwork where you could put the headset on and then kind of dissect this data body. So when you put the headset on, you see the body floating. There's a big word cloud of all my Facebook data. And then I'm surrounded by my own facial recognition scans, which your phone can take and is measuring all the time that you're looking at your phone. And then yet you're invited to kind of dissect the body. You can pull out, there are all the cross sections through the body. There's organs, and then some organs like the brain, you could pull the brain out and you can sort of tip out its passwords and logins. And then the heart, you can pour out emojis. The stomach is cookies. So we try to put as much data as possible into the body, and then you kind of like dissect it, but you only have 3 minutes and then it starts to go back to the mothership. So it's like impossible fight of trying to like actually keep hold of your data. It just always is really so, we have so much data that we can't kind of like cope with it all. I mean, I don't think the videos is going to work. I'm just going to not worry about the video. They're all on my website if you want to see them. So that was My Data Body, which was a really interesting project. But then the partner piece to it was called Your Data Body. So I was really thinking about the data of other people. And so I've been working with data for a long time and realized that you have all these different kinds of data. So you have like the open source, anonymized data, which typically anyone is changing all the time, but anybody can download and get access to. So the first scene of this VR piece was working with anonymized data, and it was in like a web, and you could like pick out these different parts and then make like this Frankenstein figure. But if you took one of the data sets and put it to your ear, you would hear the original study data, like why that data was originally acquired, kind of prompting you to like think, should I really be using this if the permission wasn't given explicitly for this kind of use? And then the second scene was going through kind of like the ethics protocols where the data is being donated with consent. And so active consent, people know what they're doing with the data, that they're donating it for an artwork. But then the final scenes were with kind of consent, but also with authorship. So then it was actually one of the people who donated data was Elizabeth Ingram, who's also an artist in the community. And she had a lot of scans for oncology reasons. And because she was an artist, we invited her to come and work with us on the project. And so she and her husband, who's a poet, Bernd Hildebrand, they decided where the data was going to be placed, how it would look. Bernd wrote poetry. And so really think about situating these scans in a very kind of emotional way and a historical, geographical way. So the decisions that were made were that they have a property in the arboreal forest, and there's a lot of kind of old homestead cabins. So we scanned those cabins and then placed Liz's data in them, and then burnt poetry. You can see that there. I'm sorry the videos aren't working, but they're kind of placed in this environment. So all her brain scans were placed in, I think it's the Miller cabin. And the reason why is because Bernd felt that the scans almost looked like an oven, and he remembered the stove, there being a stove in that cabin when he was a child. And then here, this is one of Liz's CT scans in another cabin, and there's kind of the poetry. And then Scott Smallwood also went and did a lot of field recordings in that location. So it was a really beautiful project where the scans were situated, sonically, emotionally, and geographically. And seeing these scans in this location really in this way really made me think about what other kind of structures could you put scans in, and what would it mean? And I've always been very interested in how MRI scans essentially imaging water, and CT scans like image hardness. And so I was thinking about locations or architectures that could be linked to water. And my mother was, she was from Brittany in France. And she was and my grandmother had always been quite superstitious about healing water. And they had lots of bottles of healing water. And I was actually in a railway station, and completely by chance came across this book, which is Les Eaux Miraculeuses et Guérisseuses de Bretagne, which means the miraculous and healing waters of Brittany. And so it sent me down this rabbit hole of looking into these healing fountains, of which there are hundreds, if not thousands of, in this peninsula of Brittany. And it was a very Celtic region. It still is. It still has a lot of Celtic origins, and a very strong connection to Celtic traditions. And so they were Celtic, so they were sort of very, very old. But then in the 500s and 600s, the Christian monks from the British Isles, who were escaping the Saxons, went to Brittany and then took over a lot of these Celtic water sites, and then made them into these Christian sites where there would be promises of specific kinds of healing. So all the way across, and I sort of worked with all these, I found these books and some websites, and from that was able to create this map of fountains to visit. And at the time when I first started, I didn't really know like what they would look like or what they would be healing. But here is an example of one of the first fountains that I visited. And this is Fontaine Saint-Gouvin. That's the name of my grandfather and my uncle. And this fountain is supposed to help with rheumatism, and to help eye illnesses, but it also helps young pigs. And this is because apparently the water you can see the water contains iron because it has all this red iron. But you kind of wonder what came first, the pigs that needed the iron or the fountain. But they're just kind of, some of them are completely overgrown. Some have been very well kept. Some are still visited, some are not. This is another example of a fountain, Fontaine Notre-Dame de Calvin. And this was a very important fountain, and it was very important for mariners. So because Brittany is surrounded by sea, often people would go fishing in Iceland, which was very dangerous in the northern waters of the Atlantic. And before they went to sea, they would come to this fountain and they would have their head shaved and their beards shaved. They would be blessed before they went to sea. And then I guess once they'd gone, then the wives or the women were left, and they would have to look after the children. So it's also a fountain for women who want children and for women who have sick children. Again, a very beautiful location. This one, interestingly, has direct connections to Canada. All of these fountains, they have an annual pilgrimage, which goes from like the local chapel or church, and people walk, come to the fountain, and then the fountain is blessed once a year so that the water has these powers. And in the kind of the pilgrimage, they have these banners, and one of the banners says Les immigrés du Canada, which suggests that there were people who from here, from Brittany, came to Canada and then went back. I tried to find out, but all I know is that it was in between the war years that this banner was donated. And then this one is really amazing. This is one that is the closest to where my ancestry is from. So it's where my grandparents would have lived and probably where my grandparents would have visited. And it's literally a staircase, a granite staircase. And you go down, it's about, I think, 13 steps. And then it's just this pool of freezing water at the bottom, full of tadpoles. It's amazing. And there's like a little passage. They say there's a passageway to the left that goes to a local manor house. And this one is meant to heal ear and eye problems. But to be guaranteed to have your hearing, your eyesight healed, you have to take a silver coin, go down into the water, and then come back up and then leave that silver coin on the altar. So just to like point out that this was like a consumerist activity, that there was it was a financial transaction, and it's from a lot of the proceeds of these fountains that neighboring chapels were built and all the other things. So it's something that kind of it also points to the fact that there was a big public health issue in this part of Brittany. It's a very poor part of France, so there weren't any doctors actually until the early 1900s. And then this healing fountain, Sainte-Anne-d'Auray, is it is the most important fountain in Brittany. And it's actually very connected to here. It should have also is a very clear signifier of the colonial transmission of the healing fountains, because Lac Sainte-Anne was actually named after Sainte-Anne-d'Auray. So the French missionaries came to Edmonton, and then originally Lac Sainte-Anne was called Wakame, or God's Lake, by the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, and Manito Shahagan, or Spirit Lake, by the Cree, and it was then named Lac Sainte-Anne by Jean-Baptiste Thibault, who founded the mission. And then later on they went back to Lac Sainte-Anne, Sainte-Anne-d'Auray, saw the pilgrimage, and it was because of seeing that pilgrimage then the pilgrimage of Lac Sainte-Anne started. So amazingly, there's this really strong connection between this location and Edmonton, which is for me very powerful for many reasons, but also because my mother's name was Anne, named after Sainte-Anne. So I went a really long way to find a connection to my mother, which was beautiful. And on the subject of my mother, this is Notre-Dame de Folguet in Lesnevan, which is where my mother's family was from, a very important pilgrimage site. And it's said that if a young woman throws a hairpin into water and it floats, then they'll be married in a year. But I show this one because whilst I was in Brittany researching these, I was also like clearing the attic of my mother's house. She had passed away in 2017, and it had taken me years to get around to doing it. But I found a whole bag of cine footage that my grandfather must have taken, and then found this video. So I might escape out of this though. Okay, so we'll watch this. So this must be my great-grandmother. This is my grandmother. And then this is my mum there, the little toddler there. My grandfather wasn't the best cinematographer, but it has quite a strong meaning to know that my mother must have been there when she was a young child. And so this kind of started like this, just kind of visiting some. I've now visited 93 fountains. There are so many of them, and it's become this real passion project. It's a wonderful thing to like. it's very beautiful, but it's also has a lot of hope, and a lot of people feel a lot of connection to it. And so what I do is I visit the fountains, I scan them with my phone. So I make a 3D scan, and then I take 360 video of the fountain and also in the fountain water. And then when I come back, I try and do as much research as I can to find out about the history of all the fountains. So part of the research is taking the form of this database, which is on aviary, and anybody can access it. This just shows you some of the fountains. So here's one of the 360 videos. So this is one of the first ones we saw, Fontaine Saint-Gobain. And this is in the water of that fountain. You can see the water literally bubbling up. This was the Kelvin one, the where the mariners would come to be blessed. And this is the staircase one. So you can see I could have visited them at different times of the day. This one, the sun is just setting. I got there just before sunset. And here this is down in the water. There's the tunnel here.
Where's the tunnel going?
Apparently to the local manor house.
We're back to that one?
Yeah. So there's tadpoles in this one. Quite a lot of tadpoles. And then, so we have this database of 360 videos. And then now with my colleague, Scott Smallwood, we've been also taking sound recordings because the sound is so amazing. You heard it already, there was bird song, you have lots of insects buzzing, you hear the water trickling. And so with Scott, hopefully it's going to play. Okay, it's not going to play, but maybe I can. Oh, it is. Yes, I'm not sure if you can hear, it's quite quiet, but each of the locations has a very different soundscape. And so we also have now these 360 soundscapes that you can access on the database and that we're using to make artworks. This one was very interesting. I don't know if you heard that, but there was a gunshot that went off. And whilst we were recording, they're obviously hunting kind of in like the hills above us. And so the gunshots just move around in the sound recording. So they started there and they came all the way around us. I won't play all of these, but this one is just so good. So there was one where they weren't goats, they were sheep. We put goats, but there was one where like Scott really wanted to get a recording of the goats like bang, but they didn't. But they did. He did get this. Poor goat had a bad cough. So in addition to these like 360 sounds, we also have these very specific sounds from the environment. And those we're using to create, we're now creating a virtual reality artwork from all this data that we have, which will be kind of a bit like the database, it autoplays. So in a way, it's almost like a journey. You could just leave it and it will just autoplay through all the 360 videos. It's almost like a journey through the fountains. But with the virtuality artwork, we want to do the same. We're working on the same kind of thing, that you have all these different scenes and you will get to go through and visit with all the fountains. And it starts off when you when you go in, you come to this kind of view where we've got taken the 360, the 3D scan and just taken the points. And then each of the points are visualized as a symbol. Here it's the Celtic alphabet, but each fountain has a different kind of symbol. And it has a sound attached to it. So as you walk around it, you're kind of having all this sound. And then when you go in, with trying to think about like contemporary spaces for healing, alternative to the medical complex. But so we're thinking about like online spaces. So we've been looking at Reddit. So for this fountain, for instance, this is Fontaine de la Vierge, where people would have gone to help to pray for like stronger breast milk and to help with their children. So we went to Reddit and searched for the similar kind of thing. And then we have these conversations, which we then asked actors to record to voice. And so in this fountain, you go in, you have all these sounds, but then you hear these like whispers of these Reddit conversations, which have the same kind of for the same kind of ailment. You can go in, and then if you have to swim, and then it will visualize the whole of the fountain and all the data. And then finally, you see like this ball that you saw the 360 video. We've sort of made it into a ball, and then you could go towards the ball. And then you go into the ball, and then you're in that ball for a while, and then you come out to the next fountain. So you go to sort of traverse all these fountains through the data. So I won't go on too long because I'd love to talk to you about some of the other things that we're thinking of doing. This gives you some idea of the visualization, and we're hoping to have this it's still in a bit of proof of concept at the moment, but we're aiming hopefully by next summer to have something that we can present and share with people. I'll give you some, and these are some examples of the different Reddit scripts that we're looking at. So we have some fountains are to help with skin. There's one which is just for whooping cough, which is quite an amazing fountain. It's at the top of a hill, and mothers would have to carry their children all the way at the top of the hill. And so there was a woman called Lady Monde who was quite a philanthropist, and then she built this staircase, 100 stairs, to make it easier for the mothers to carry their children. We have these images of mothers of holding their children up to this fountain in the hope that they would cure them of whooping cough. And then a lot about anxiety. There's also a lot about anxiety and mothers, like sick to death for caring for their children. Another thing that I'm working on that I've become really fascinated because of these, when I use my phone and I do the 3D scan, it creates a 3D model. And I was interested in like thinking all these spaces you go into, they're all unique. None of them have the same architecture. And you're kind of, and they kind of like, they have staircases. They're like, you're led around to different pools. So I took the top-down view of the fountains and made a series of drawing where I printed out the top-down view, and then there's a Celtic ritual that something you can give money, but also you're meant to walk around the fountains in a clockwise manner. You're meant to circumambulate the fountain. The idea being that you like create an energy around the fountain, and that's what helps cure you. So I did these drawings where then with my pen, I did that circum drawing around the fountains. So this is Fontaine Saint-Guirec. This is the one with the gunshots. And this is actually quite similar those. Yeah. But I showed you these because I'm really interested. I was very interested in the architecture of the fountains, but as well as the Reddit script, really interested in AI health apps and how they kind of also fill this kind of space, this kind of like lack in public health, that people are going to AI health apps in order for this promise of healing or this promise of some sort of insight into their ailment. And so thinking about somehow maybe like combining these drawings with trying to understand the architecture of AI health apps. And so we've been at this big, enormous spreadsheet of all these healing fountains, but then now also adding in different health apps as they would match the fountain. So for example, that whooping cough one, then maybe you know it, there's an app called Cough Pro, which you can download, have it running on your phone, and then every time you cough, it will, I guess, record you, and then at the end of the day, it will tell you what cough you've got. And it's just there's now like an app like that for everyone, for almost everything. And also realizing from like as a digital media artist, I know how easy it is to make an app and publish it with no, and then doing some research into it, there's no sort of process to go through to publish an app which purports to be a health app. And of course, again, these are monetized. There's a consumer object that's being sold, and so I'm really fascinated again, like just thinking maybe this will become part of the project. Yeah. I think that's my last slide. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and yeah, I'd love to, if you have any thoughts or if you know of any AI health apps that people are using a lot, I'd be really interested to hear. I didn't know. In the beginning, to be honest, I just didn't know, and I didn't know that my camera could go in the water. Um, but then I don't know, I saw that it could, and then I thought, okay, I'll try it in the water. And then when I did, I was like, wow, okay, and then realizing after having visited a number that every fountain was different. The water was different, the algae was different, the fauna in it was different, the amount of light going into it was different. So I started capturing it, and it was only, and I would spend days going and getting data running from one fountain to the next. I didn't actually review the data until afterwards. And so it's only now that I'm really like, okay, I love actually the water. The videos of the water, I think, are the most beautiful. And I'm thinking of there's something in France which happens a lot, which is like called Son et Lumière, which is like a sound and light show. So also thinking that footage could be beautiful, sort of projected as like a projection mapping inside one of these big cathedrals. And so now that's maybe start collecting these videos more, but it was just playing. Yeah, but and now I have to go back to the ones that I didn't get the water for in the beginning. Yeah, done. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I really love the sound it goes in. And then I am in an exhibition in January at the AGA, and I'm making a film just of the water. So it's just a film where it just, because as it goes into the water and then comes out again to all the fountains. Yeah, it's nice because all the kind of the sand or the dirt kind of gets lifted up, and you have this a plume of a trace. Yeah. Mm. And that's quite a unique one. It's the only one where you kind of go down into it. And so I had to put sort of go into it to put the tripod down, and I couldn't escape. But then afterwards, I kind of really liked that footage. Yeah. 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 And there will be the exhibition, which kind of related to this. It's going to be the drawings and the film. And that will be at the AGA in January. There'll be an opening. Hopefully there'll be an artist talk. So welcome to
Yes,
to
we'll
that.
definitely
Yeah.
promote that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and please, I can also share the link to the database, and you can go through all the fountains at your leisure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good question. It started because of that piece when we had this, like Liz Ingram's CT scans, and they were placed in these scans of the cabins. So it kind of took me to thinking like where else could I place MRI scan data? And so I tried to find these architectural spaces that relate to water, but now I kind of feel like the body doesn't need to be there. The data doesn't need to be there. So I haven't put, it's almost like there's too much to take in. So it's like the scan data is kind of not there yet. Maybe it will come. There is one fountain, which is Fontaine Saint-Gobain, which again is very close to is very linked to my family, where there's it was meant to be, they say it was the bed of the saint. And so when you go to the fountain, it's like a stone kind of like bed, and you lie in there. So maybe I'll put my scans in there. Maybe I'll put my scan there, but I kind of think it's so beautiful as it is. The body doesn't need to be present. It's present in the promise of the fountain, and it's present in the whispering. But I'm not sure you actually need the data anymore. But I can just play with that a bit more. If I put a body in this work, if I put an MRI scan body in there, I think it would detract from the beauty of the fountains.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of resisting doing it. The original impetus was to do that, but it's so much data that I kind of feel like it will be too much to put the body in. But I should try it. It's time.
Right.
So like with the deep connection piece where you could hold the hand of the scanned body, that's in 3 dimensions because it's kind of, and then when you hold the hand, the heart starts beating and then lungs start breathing. So it's kind of animated with time. So it's like I see there's a 4-dimensional scan.
I understand that these fountains are, is that sort of superstition that you can go there and get healed, or is there something there energetically?
Well, it definitely feels very healing when you go there. It feels a very positive thing to do. And maybe that's like a placebo effect thing. Like it's a pilgrimage. Like I came all the way from Canada all the way to France and then drove for hours, searched and searched to find these fountains. And then you get there and it's lush and green. There's this incredibly pure water just kind of bubbling up. And then you have all this bird song and you kind of like wash yourself in the water, and it feels like a positive, like in an age where maybe you just don't know what to do anymore, you're doing something.
Right.
And it's beautiful, but I don't know. I don't think it has any, maybe like the iron one, maybe because it has iron in the water. So maybe there are medicinal properties, and there are some other fountains. There's a lot of different kind of rock in Brittany. So maybe there are lots of minerals in the water that do make it very good to drink, but.
And in the one where there's a tunnel that goes off to the manor, is that water down there, is that drinkable?
Yes.
Did you drink it?
Yep.
What was it like?
Beautiful. Ice cold. It's really cold, which may be also why it felt like it healed, because it would be numbing. There's one fountain where we had one of the sound recordings is you're meant to like fill your mouth with water from the fountain, or dip a piece of bread into the water of the fountain and put it in your mouth and then walk around it 3 times. And that's meant to help with the toothache, which it would, because it's really cold. So I guess it would numb a bit. But I mean, I don't want to say that it's not, for one of us Catholic, that it isn't like healing, but if there's no like obviously medical reason that it would heal. Oh, it doesn't.
Oh.
No, I guess I was just interested in the way that technology sees us and then how we know ourselves with how technology sees us and how maybe there's parallels in like, I started working with this data when like I didn't even have a mobile phone at that time. I didn't really use computers. And now we do nothing but use computers and phones. Everything is mediated by technology. So there's all these technologies that allow the body to be digitized. But how does it do that? Like I'm interested, like with the family portrait, we had this kind of illusion of the body, but you could see straight through it. It's not all there, but we think it's all there. And how do we know ourselves as these? I put it together in a sculpture where it kind of gave the illusion of a body, but normally you don't see scans like that. You see one at a time. You're never kind of whole. Um, and then with the CT scan data, it's very high resolution. So you can then afterwards post-process it, slice it in any way. I made her into somebody who has 8 arms, somebody who has like their torso excavated. This malleability of who we think we are in the digital age online. I was interested in that. Like, can we use these data bodies as metaphors for understanding how we are understanding ourselves in the digital age? So I kind of wasn't thinking of it from a medical perspective at all when I was younger, but now as you get older and you have more experiences with what that kind of data can mean in a personal level, and understand it more, then that kind of has changed. And that one with holding the hand, like a physical human being, the companion for a digital body, that actually came because people often think that I'm like a post-humanist, that I like that I kind of think the body should transcend into the datascape, which is not what I think. But I was asked to, like, in a way, kind of promote digital robot nurses. And I just found that really like awful, especially because my mother had just died and I'd been with her. I'd had the privilege of being with her the last 2 weeks of her life by her bedside. And this idea that like a robot could be by your bedside as you died kind of just horrified me. So that's why I made that piece where it kind of inverts it, that you are the one standing there. And as long as you stand there, you keep this virtual body animated. You keep its heart beating and lungs breathing. Yeah, these fountains now, there's hardly anyone at them. Before they were also important thing was they were very important, like so the third spaces, social spaces. Like there was one almost for every village. So there's people would have come there and would have maybe been able to discuss their ailments or their troubles. They would have come together and there would have been this hope for kind of healing, but at least you had a community. And now with things like, and that's why that we use the Reddit is that the alternative now? These like Reddit threads where you can discuss with people about your ailments and then these apps where it's very singular, just for you. And you don't really get to share it with anyone. You don't get to have that community.
There was another comment online that I can read off. Rosemary said that she's going to a focus group that's looking at voice AI apps to help seniors who might have problems signing up for their appointments. And online, she said someone was speaking about a bot. And maybe she was referring to the cough app that you were talking about, but she said she would pass that on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like you see there's like really great applications for these apps, and it's true like making appointments can be difficult, and but it's just so scary how they've proliferated and they're not verified. We don't, and then I can imagine as health practitioners, you get people coming and say, "Oh, my my app says this," and then how hard must it be to fight against that? Or ChatGPT has told me this should be happening. I just can't imagine how hard that is in the healthcare. Yeah, what do you do? You're all medical students, eh? Um, yeah, I mean, do you get training on that? Like what to say if somebody comes to you with that?
We told the kids have to do sufficient counseling. At the end of the day, it's their health and choice, but we told them with our training, our evidence-based medicine, we explain why and why not. It's an agreement with ChatGPT. And then ideally you still stay on the same team as the patient rather than say, you should use that, like that's garbage.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it takes a little bit more patience and just finesse, but I think everyone is trying to figure out how to use AI in a meaningful way
Yeah.
that doesn't come between the human interaction.
And it's coming so fast.
Yeah, it's incredibly fast.
Incredibly fast. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so I love that you mentioned AI nurses, because that similarly troubles me, the concept that we can presume that human interaction can be replaced in any way. And I love that image, like the story of your mom being a nurse with that image is really powerful, of actually like bringing AI to life with touch. But my question for you after watching all of this is, what inspired the original desire? Like, what made you think, oh, I should make a family portrait of MRI images that came to where it is now?
Ah, good question. Is that I didn't normally I do start my talk with explaining that a bit more, but when I was a student, I did a seminar called The Uncanny Body, and I had to write an essay. And I was just learning, like, there were these rooms at the university where everybody would like go in, and to me look like they were watching separate televisions and like type away, but not talk to each other. I thought that was just really so. And now I know it was a computer lab and people were like doing email. But I think it was so strange that people were like in a room with other people, but they weren't talking to those people. They were like communicating with people somewhere else through this like machine. And so I decided to write an essay called The Physical versus the Virtual Body. And in my research for that essay, this was as an undergraduate student, I came across the Visible Human Project. I don't know if you know the Visible Human Project. It was like a National Library of Medicine project where they wanted to make a digital atlas of a human body, and they put it out to tender. And then the team that won proposed to take the frozen corpse of a man, freeze him, and then slice him very finely and photograph all those images and then upload them to the internet. And I became like fast obsessed with that project. It was just so like the history of anatomy. They decided it was Joseph Paul Jernigan, who was a convicted criminal on death row. They convinced him to donate his body to medical science. And they said they would give him lethal injection rather than electric chair if he agreed. And then in the process of digitizing him, so in slicing and photographing him, his body sort of went to mush because it was so thin. But then what's left is this huge database of scans. And so it was that project, the Visible Human Project. And I was also thinking about like your ideal man. He was also the ideal man, even though he was a convicted murderer and only had one testicle. He was the ideal. So I went online, found the images, downloaded those cross sections, and then made a sculpture of him where I stacked them, printed them onto sheets of plexiglass, stacked it back up again, and then recreated Joseph Paul Jernigan. And it's called I Know You Inside Out. I'm playing with this like a romantic notion of meeting your ideal man online. And then when I exhibited that, people came to me and told me, oh, do you know what an MRI scan is? And then but then I looked into what an MRI scan was, and then had this idea of doing the family portrait. So it all came from that. So I was always interested in like anatomical imagery as a student, and even at school I did life drawing. So I was always interested in the body, but it came from that. And then because the technology has just been evolving and evolving, and there's never nothing else to like explore within that field. Although I do feel like with scan data now, I'm happy not to be working with it because I've been working with it for so long.